Ada Blackjack, a young Inuit lady, sailed on a bold scientific mission to Wrangle Island, a far-flung and dangerous territory off the cold coast of Siberia in the freezing winter of 1921. What was supposed to be a quick trip turned into a horrific 2-year survival ordeal. Ada found herself caught, fighting frigid weather, hunger, and total solitude as the merciless Arctic winds howled around her. She had no idea that this path would test her to the very brink of human tolerance and turn her into an improbable hero. Struggling through brutal winters, limited supplies, and overwhelming loneliness, Ada's story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. She never aimed for glory or attention, but her amazing survival story has been repeated throughout history as a great accomplishment. Come along as we travel through the amazing life of Ada Blackjack, the forgotten hero who survived the toughest conditions of nature and lived to share her tale. Small Inuit lady Ada Blackjack set off on an expedition to Wrangle Island, a far-off territory north of Siberia, in 1921. Blackjack looked at the time an improbable hero for the hostile Arctic. Originally hired as a seamstress, she traveled with 4 men and a cat named Vic. Her work was basic. She sewed survival gear while others tackled challenging hunting and survival in hostile surroundings. She was promised food and care all year long, as well as that she wouldn't have to undertake any of the difficult survival tasks. But things did not proceed as expected. Ada Blackjack was the only team member left almost 2 years later when a rescue ship eventually showed out on the horizon, except for Vic, the cat. From a timid seamstress afraid of polar bears, she had become a strong survivor, learning how to shoot, trap, and support herself in one of the toughest environments on Earth. Adorned in a magnificent reindeer parka she had created, Ada smiled thin but triumphantly to welcome her rescuers. She had developed a suitable nickname by then, the female Robinson Crusoe. Originally known as Ada Delatuc, Ada Blackjack was born in 1898 in a small Alaskan village called Spruce Creek, just north of the Arctic Circle and near the gold rush city of Nome. Though Ada's background was far from the customs of her people, she was of Inupiat descent. Growing up among Methodist missionaries, she was not taught the survival techniques she would have needed in the desert. Rather, she picked up reading the Bible, housekeeping, sewing, and cooking European-style food. Ada wed local dog musher Jack Blackjack at the age of 16. Together, they produced 3 children. But early in her life, tragedy claimed 2 of her offspring. Her husband left Ada, and their surviving son Bennett deserted on the Seward Peninsula in 1921. Driven to keep her child safe, Ada carried Bennett back to Nome, 40 miles, fatigued enough to walk no more. Bennett had additional health issues, including tuberculosis though, and Ada lacked the wherewithal to look after him appropriately. Her only choice was to send her son to an orphanage, so pledging to see him once she had enough money. Ada finally came to Wrangle Island, driven by a need for money. Word had got out about an expedition looking for an English-speaking Alaska native seamstress. Renowned Arctic adventurer Vilhjalmur Stephenson led the expedition and presented an unduly positive view of the trip. The Arctic was friendly, he said, and plenty of animals would keep the squad going until they were picked up a year later. Stephenson's scheme was sadly quite defective, leaving 4 young men, Alan Crawford, 20, Lorne Knight, 28, Fred Maurer, 28, and Milton Gall, 19, to face the hostile terrain on their own with only 6 months of supplies. He never intended to accompany the group personally. There was amazing hubris in Stephenson. Though Britain showed no interest in it, he wished to claim Wrangle Island for the British Empire. Hoping for the best, Stephenson dispatched his inexperienced group north with nothing save his notoriety and a dangerously naive assumption that nature would supply. Joining the crew as the seamstress, Blackjack had no idea how bad things would get. Ada Blackjack's written narrative of the difficulties she encountered on the Arctic island in Vilhjalmur Stephenson's 1925 book, The Adventure of Wrangle Island, vividly captures what she remembered. They stated it was only a small island. However, the terrain looked quite big to me. Though first I considered turning back, I realized it would not be fair to the lads. These phrases capture Blackjack's anxiety as she landed on Wrangle Island in 1921 and started an expedition that would challenge her survival capacity. Blackjack's first intention upon landing was to wed one of the guys, thinking it would offer her defense in the hostile surroundings. Her advances were turned down though, and this set her into a frenzy. Fear paralyzing her, She tried to run into the mountains, considered poisoning herself, and even skipped work. Furious at her seeming disobedience, the men tied her to a flagpole and starved her. But what might have broken others just made her stronger. Ada changed throughout time to fit the Arctic surroundings. She started to be essential for the group. She sewed clothes, cooked food, cleaned dishes, and washed skins. She started working from daybreak, rising at 6 a.m. to bake bread. And soon, she was a major component of the daily schedule of the expedition. Her metamorphosis was amazing, from terror paralyzing her to happy and efficient handling of her obligations. Once dubious of her, the guys started depending more on her than they could have ever dreamed. Still, things were going to turn gloomy even with her relentless contribution. On Wrangle Island, things grew rapidly worse. Sea ice stopped a ship meant to provide fresh supplies, therefore severely starving the mission. Desperate to survive, Crawford, Maurer, and Gow decided in late January 1923 to abandon the island in search of aid. None of them would return. They traveled across the ice towards Siberia. Blackjack was left with the severely sick Lorne Knight, who had been suffering from scurvy and other diseases the team could neither treat nor diagnose. Ada looked after Knight for 6 long months, doing all in her might to keep him alive. She tried to get enough food for herself, while simultaneously tending to his every need as a doctor, nurse, friend, servant, and huntswoman. He never stops and thinks how much it's hard for women to take 4-man's place, to woodwork and to hunt for something to eat for him, she wrote in a March 1923 diary entry in shaky English. Knight often attacked her, blaming her for his illness and suffering even as his health deteriorated. But Ada, toughened by the Arctic, would not be moved by his violence. She confronted the elements with a degree of fortitude surprising even herself. Over her months on the island, Ada developed her survival skills, completely foreign to her, and became really good. Learning to hunt birds and foxes, she set traps and honed her shooting. She rapidly developed marksmanship after a few early errors, including shooting too far left or right and missing her targets. She even learned from Vic, the expedition cat, always seeking to steal the fox skins, how to keep her traps safe. Ada noted Knight's death on a typewriter, writing with simple clarity, "The day of Mr. Knight's death." When Knight finally passed away on June 23, 1923. He passed away on June 23rd. I'm not sure what time he passed either. Still, I put the date in, just to let Mr. Stephenson know what month he passed and what day of the month. She was not paralyzed by the loss of the last member of her party. Rather, Ada soldiered on, driven by the idea of seeing her son Bennett back in Alaska. Ada left Knight in his sleeping bag and barricaded his bed to guard it from wild animals. He had nowhere to bury his dead. Reiterating the walls and roof with driftwood, she entered the storage tent to escape the stench of deterioration. Above her bed, she built a gun rack in case polar bears approached too closely and kept improving the camp. Ada was quite creative and determined to live. Ada was totally alone for 3 months following Knight's death. But after nearly 2 years on Wrangle Island, a schooner called Donaldson showed up on the horizon in August 1923. Ada was in good health, and the crew was astounded by her adaptation to island life. Though the mental toll would have been intolerable, they observed she had perfected her surroundings to such a degree she could have probably lived another year in seclusion. Ada Blackjack became a reluctant hero when word of the sad conclusion of the mission traveled. Though Ada herself stayed out of the limelight, the press praised her bravery and fortitude. She insisted that she was only a mother trying to survive so she could go back to see her child. She was not a hero. Once back with Bennett, Ada paid for his tuberculosis treatment at a Seattle hospital with her salary, significantly less than what she had been promised. She returned to live in Alaska and eventually had a second son, Billy. Still, Ada's existence after Wrangle Island was defined by poverty and grief, notwithstanding her survival and fortitude. While Stephenson and others made money off of the expedition's narrative, Ada was not financially benefited and was even targeted with smear campaigns that she neglected Knight during his illness. At 58, her son Bennett passed away in 1972 from health problems that never totally disappeared. 10 years later, Ada died in a Palmer, Alaska nursing facility at 85. She buried herself next to Bennett. Though Ada Blackjack's life was full of suffering, her narrative is nonetheless a potent monument to the drive of the human spirit and the extent to which a mother will go for the love of her child. Ada Blackjack's story is a powerful reminder of human endurance and the strength that lies within us. Even when we think we've reached our breaking point, she was not an explorer or adventurer, just a mother trying to survive for the sake of her child. If you found her journey as inspiring as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others who love stories of survival and resilience. And if you want to hear more incredible true stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you won't miss our next adventure.